Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, December 1st, 2024, and this is show number 1021. Wait, wasn't it just last week when I said my voice was finally back to normal? I'm telling you, I just can't win. The poorly communicated sale of Bartender has caused many people to seek alternatives to manage their menu bar apps. While Bartender is still being developed and works as well as it ever did, you might want to consider the open-source donationware alternative called Ice for macOS Sonoma and above. I've told you about it on the podcast before, but it's why I chose Ice for my latest ScreenCastsONLINE video tutorial. I have to tell you, Ice is a delightful app with polish you don't normally associate with open-source tools. Remember, before you click the link in the show notes, that ScreenCastsONLINE is a subscription service, but with your free 7-day trial, you can watch this episode, or this tutorial, I should say, along with all of the available back catalog. Now, you know Steve and I are huge fans of Bodie Grimm and his Kilowatt podcast, which is all about electric vehicles. In addition to being great at absorbing and then explaining the technology on his show, he is spectacularly goofy. If you don't believe me, you need to listen to the Kilowatt 49th Annual Thanksgiving Extravaganza. This episode featured me, Steve, and Bodie's daughter Sierra playing a Jeopardy-inspired game designed by Bodie and ChatGPT. Before we started, Bodie informed us that he would appreciate infighting and hijinks. I gained true respect for Sierra in how she embraced those directions. The rules are vague, we override any semblance of order that Bodie tries to introduce, and who wins the game is a nail-biter to the very end. You can find the Kilowatt podcast in your podcatcher of choice, or follow the link in the show notes to get right to the 49th Annual Thanksgiving Extravaganza. I believe you'll be entertained and amused. I'm not just a fan of things that Bodie Grimm does, I'm a huge fan of everything Jill from the Northwoods creates. She's recently started to create her wonderful Start with Small Steps podcast as both a video and audio podcast. She'll be on an upcoming episode of the NosillaCast where she explains the tools she's using to streamline this process and create both at the same time. It's really, really interesting. In the meantime, I want you to check out her new video format at the link in the show notes. If you haven't heard Starts with Small Steps before, I'd call it a motivational channel where she reads books on self-help and then explains how she's used what she's learned to give you maybe some ideas of how you can use the things that she talks about to help improve your life. It's a very happy, joyful, and wonderful show in general, but look for Start with Small Steps 208, Simple Ways to Feel at Home in Any Place, and of course, there's a link in the show notes. If you're looking for some holiday gifts that are even guaranteed to be accessible to those with low vision, check out the Unmute Presents Holiday Gift Guide. Michael Babcock and Marty Sobo are joined by our good friend of the show, Chris Cook, and Liz Botner to talk about accessible tech gifts and play contributions by internet superstars such as myself. You can find Unmute Presents in your podcatcher of choice, and then look for the episode called 2024 Unmute Holiday Gift Guide, Tech Treasures and Thoughtful Gadgets. Or, of course, as I said, you can follow the link in the show notes. Remember last week when I told you a long and happy story about adding a new way to donate to support the shows at the Podfeet podcast? Paul Nealon had mentioned that having to create an account to either use Patreon or PayPal was just enough friction to keep him from donating for a long time. He said that if I'd had an Apple Pay button, he would have done it long before. The happy story was how I created a Stripe account, which let me do exactly that. It was wildly successful, with a lot of donations flowing in just during the first 24 hours after I announced my fancy new podfeet.com/donate page. I basked in the joy of the generosity of others throughout Monday. And then on Tuesday, I got an email from Stripe entitled, "Closure of your Stripe account for Podfeet Podcasts." Yep. The message said, "We're writing to let you know that we have determined that your business, Podfeet Podcast, is in violation of the Stripe Services Agreement. Specifically, we're unable to accept payments for donations to unregistered charities, as mentioned in our restricted businesses list. As a result, we'll have to close your Stripe account on December 26, 2024. I couldn't believe it. I used the provided link immediately to explain that I wasn't trying to say I was a charity and that I fully expected to pay taxes on this income. A few hours later, I got a response that said, unfortunately, following an additional review of your account, we're still unable to support your business as it falls under one of our restricted business categories. I read all of the terms and conditions I could find, and nowhere could I find any restrictions I'd violated. I asked ChatGPT for help, and it gave me a link that talked about donations. And in there, it repeated what they've been trying to explain to me. Donations are the same thing as charity. I thought it was worth one more try, so I wrote a new email in which I asked them how I could use their services. I told them I didn't run ads and how I've been using PayPal for one-time donations, and maybe there was some different distinction I could be under that would let me give Stripe money instead of PayPal. Again, they responded very quickly. Thank you for providing additional information about your business. Unfortunately, following an additional review of your account, we're still unable to support your business as it falls under one of our restricted business categories. And that's processing where there are no bona fide goods or services sold or donations accepted. We're sorry we can't be of more help, but these restrictions are firm. Now, I think what they mean is that a voluntary donation to a podcast isn't considered a bona fide good or service sold. I'm not holding anything back from you if you don't pay, so I'm not really selling you anything. I suspect that maybe if I'd set this up as a premium podcast and I was giving you restricted content, it might have worked, but I don't want to do that. I went to sleep very sad on Tuesday night. But in the middle of the night, I had an epiphany. Stripe isn't the only game in town. What about one of those, tip jar type services? I went back to sleep, and a bit later I woke up again with a whole new epiphany. I have seen and donated to people via something called Buy Me a Coffee. This service is widely used for shareware software, which is a bona fide good, but they never really connect the two. It's more like after the bell person brings you your luggage and they make it obvious that, well, if you dropped a few dollars in their palm, they wouldn't sneer at you. When I was fully awake, I went to buymeacoffee.com and I created an account. It asked to connect to my bank so it could pay me, and it opened to a Stripe login. My first thought that I'd hit another brick wall, but I kept going. It fed me into a different section of Stripe.com called Stripe Express, and it was branded with Buy Me a Coffee. From what I can tell, I have two different accounts in Stripe now, both under the same login credentials. One for my soon-to-be-canceled Podfeed Podcast account, and one to my Stripe Express account through Buy Me a Coffee. Before going much further, I did a preemptive strike, and I wrote back in my original thread to my incredibly responsive friends at Stripe. I said, I'm setting up an account at Buy Me a Coffee, but it says they use Stripe for payment processing. Can I assume that Stripe won't block me from using Buy Me a Coffee? In a much wordier answer than the other folks who'd succinctly just said, nope, Simran, amongst a lot of other information, said, I see that you have another Stripe Express connected to Buy Me a Coffee. This account is active and set to receive payments and payouts. You can use this account to collect payments from your customers. Additionally, I would also like to inform you that currently your Express account doesn't require any further verification. Now, they didn't technically answer my question, but I figured it was worth a shot to keep going. In Buy Me a Coffee, they asked for a banner image, so I supplied one that has Chit Chat Across the Pond, Programming by Stealth, No Silicast, and Taming the Terminal logos on it. Technically, when I first did it, it said Chit Chat Across the Pond Light, but I've gone back in there and fixed that branding. Anyway, it basically just gives you an idea of a pile of podcasts. They also asked for an avatar, but my pod feet didn't fit nicely in the circle provided, so I used a photo my grandson Forbes took of me. Believe it or not, that's all I had to do on Buy Me a Coffee to get the page up and connected to Stripe. Just like before, if you're using Safari, you will see an Apple Pay logo and an option to pay with any credit card. If you use Link, you can autofill your credit card as well. As I explained last week, very sadly, non-Safari browsers don't show the Apple Pay option. I didn't have to do any work at all to have these options available for you. They're just there. I think that's what they mean by the Express part of Stripe Express. It's just sort of auto setup. Now, let's talk about how smart I am. Remember last week when I said I wanted to use podfeed.com/donate as the URL instead of podfeed.com/Stripe, just in case I ever wanted to change my payment processor? Well, that decision sure became useful much sooner than I expected. I went back to DigitalOcean, my service provider, logged into my console, opened my Nginx configuration file, changed the redirect of podfeed.com/donate from Stripe over to buymeacoffee.com/podfeed. I reloaded the Nginx web server, and now my donate link goes right to Buy Me a Coffee, the donation page there, instead of Stripe. I just feel so brilliant for doing it that way. Now here's a little more info on Buy Me a Coffee. From your perspective, while you do get to choose how much to donate, it's in the number of $5 coffees you want to buy me. Now, you might want to think $5 is a lot for coffee, and it is, but that is just about what my grande, non-fat, no-whip, no-foam 180-degree mocha costs over at Starbucks. You won't be able to donate $38 or $27, but I don't think anyone's ever done anything but a multiple of $5 anyway. Well, actually, I think somebody gave $12 last week, so I'm kind of off on that, but you're going to have to be in $5 increments. Now, it defaults to 1 cup and has options for 3 or 5 cups, but you can type in any number of cups you want to donate. Then it suggests you say something nice and add your name or social handle. I think that's sweet. On the flip side, having Buy Me a Coffee and Stripe involved means the financial cut is taken by 2 companies instead of just one. I still have to pay the 2.9% plus 30 cents to Stripe, and Buy Me a Coffee takes another 5%. That's pretty steep. In US dollars, it means $20 turns into $18.12. You know what, though? That's still great because everyone who didn't want to open an account at all has an easy way now to use Apple Pay or any credit card they want. Now, of the 3 services, the best deal for me is still Patreon because I got in on it before 2019, so I'm considered a founder. Founders only pay 1.6% plus 30 cents. Now, the next best deal for me is PayPal at 2.99%, and then Buy Me a Coffee, which is at 7.9% plus 30 cents. I don't mean to discourage you from using the new shiny Buy Me a Coffee option if you don't want to create an account. I'm just saying if you already have a PayPal or Patreon account, it's okay by me if you want to keep using it, especially those Patreon accounts. Now, there's one more great thing about Buy Me a Coffee. They have a very obvious toggle in the interface to let people see the donation amounts in their own currency. I had Stephen Getz in Canada check, and he confirmed that he can see it in Canadian dollars rather than US. Now I need Tom Maddock to verify that the interface is accessible without actually donating this time. He checked out the Stripe one to make sure it was accessible for me, but he doesn't need to donate to prove that it's accessible. The bottom line is, I had a sad couple of days after such a great victory, but now I'm happy again since I found a really good solution. Fingers crossed that Stripe stands by what they told me and leaves my Buy Me a Coffee account alone. And of course, I'm patting myself on the back for my brilliance in naming the URL generically to podfeet.com/donate. Now, one more thing about the change from Stripe to Buy Me a Coffee. After Ian Prinsen made a donation via Stripe, I wrote to him to discuss one thing that gave me pause about the service. I could see his home address. In fact, the physical address for every kind donor is in the database in Stripe. I don't want access to that kind of information. I was asking him if he thought that was an intrusion on your privacy right around the time I got the notification from Stripe that they were canceling my account. I'm happy to note that Klaus Wolf donated to the podcast using my new Buy Me a Coffee method, and I just checked. The supporter page I can see gives me no personal information about him other than the email address he provided. Now, he was kind enough to add a little note where it says, say something nice, and he added his social media handle. So I see that, and the little note does show on the main page at podfeet.com/donate under recent supporters, so you can see it too. The other thing is he donated in euro, and his euro turned into dollars to me, and I actually got more than a $5 coffee because of the exchange rate. In any case, I'm glad to be using Buy Me a Coffee, so I'm not responsible for knowing anything about you that you didn't choose to share with me.
Hi folks, Bart here with a little solo review where it's possible I may need to apologize for spending a little bit too much of your money. But anyway, let's get stuck in. I'm going to set the scene a little bit here and say that it's probably fair to say I'm not shy about buying Apple Watch bands. At last count, I believe the answer was 30, and I don't own any watch bands anymore that I don't use. I give them away when I realize I'm not using them. And I've also reviewed quite a few of them on the NosillaCast over the years. Now, the fact that Apple haven't changed the size of the lug for me anyway, since my Apple Watch Series 0, because I've always bought the bigger size watch of the two, which they've changed the name of that size many times. But anyway, it's had the same size of lug. And the Apple Watch Ultra that I'm wearing at the moment also shares the same size of lug as the original Series Zero big version. So every strap I've ever bought still works with my current watch, which is kind of cool, which is also why I have 30 of them to some extent, but also I just like buying them. Because really, when it comes to my fashion sense, my tastes are spectacularly simple when it comes to the more traditional stuff like clothes and shoes. Right? I'm not spending any significant amount of money whatsoever on clothes or shoes. But I do push the boat out a bit in terms of me watch bands. I basically consider having the perfect band for every situation and every colour combination to be something I take pride in. And for the holidays, I love to have something silly and childish because it is guaranteed to be noticed by kids and to bring a smile to their face. It also completely oblivious to the fact that I have a Minnie Mouse Christmas watch strap on, despite being a grown man. But the kids absolutely, totally and utterly notice it. You know, at Halloween when I have my, appropriate Halloween ones on, people, only the kids notice too. Anyway, like I say, I like buying watch bands. I've told you about them many times. So you might think I spend an absolute fortune on watch bands. But of those 30 straps, the vast, vast majority of them actually aren't that expensive because I tend to steer clear of the Apple own brand ones with the exception of the sports loops and stuff, which come in at about €50. And actually, of my very favourite bands, very, very few of them cost more than €50. And a lot of them are between €20 and €25. Every now and then I'll push the boat out with a nice official band from Apple. I think I spent $129 on one of the leather ones once. And I have a feeling I spent a little bit more than the usual $50 on some of my Apple Watch Ultra bands because they tend to be a little bit expensive. But on the whole, I actually don't spend a lot on watch bands. So I rather surprised myself after watching Apple's most recent keynote that I have completely, A, that I bought the thing, and B, that I have completely, totally and utterly fallen in love with Apple's rethink of the classical Milanese loop designed for the Apple Watch Ultra, because I'll be honest, the €219 price tag, generally speaking, would have scared me off in the past. But because this was the first year in as long as I can remember that neither myself nor the better half needed either a new iPhone or a new Apple Watch, I was able to sort of mentally justify to myself, well, normally at this time of year, you're buying at least one smartphone or smartwatch, which means you're spending at least €500. So only spending €219, why, you're saving a fortune. This is very intelligent of you, Bart. You're being really frugal. No, I'm spending €219 on an Apple Watch strap, but hey, whatever one does, whatever one tells oneself to help one feel better as one balances the books, so be it. Anyway, I bought it. I bought it in natural as opposed to in black because my Apple Watch Ultra is last year's model. I think it's the Ultra 2 though. By the way, it's in natural titanium, not in the new black they just announced this year. So I bought the natural titanium coloured version of the Milanese loop. Now, this is not the first time Apple have sold a Milanese loop. In fact, if memory serves, Milanese loop was one of the original handful of options with the very first Apple Watch Series 0. And they didn't really have much to choose from back then, but the Milanese loop was right there from the start. And to be blunt, and I was never interested in that strap at all. It was a lot more money than the sports band. I don't remember how much more, but I remember looking at it going, nope, 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 nope. It also looked rather delicate and fragile. The very, very fine links looked very delicate. And it just didn't fit my fashion sense. The infinitely adjustable nature of the magnetic closure definitely piqued my interest. I liked that idea of a magnetic closure that was infinitely adjustable. But when I started getting feedback from friends and family who did buy them, I soon discovered that no, actually, the infinite adjustable isn't great because the magnet isn't strong enough and the darn things won't stay put. In fact, one of those unhappy friends is a certain Alison Sheridan, who you folks may have heard of. And her experience of the Milanese loop really wasn't great, to the point that when I said I'd bought a new Milanese loop, I got a very, very, very raised eyebrow on the Zoom call. And a quizzical look. It was like, are you nuts? I don't think it was said out loud, but that's certainly what I heard. It's, are you nuts? Anyway, this new design is a completely different beast. It is a Milanese loop in the sense that it's basically teeny tiny chainmail, but it's made of titanium. And so it doesn't feel weak or fragile. It feels engineered to perfection, to the point that it's almost impossible to believe these are separate pieces of metal and not a single flowing metal cloth. It's also quite light because it's titanium. But like the Apple Watch Ultra itself, it feels robust. You are not in any fear of damaging this thing. Nothing about it makes you think, oh, I could hurt this. It feels so robust and it looks so exquisitely engineered. I mean, it looked good in the keynote, which is why I chanced buying it for €219. And I thought it looked great in the keynote, but actually in the flesh, I don't know if metal has the flesh, but in the physical world, it is even nicer than it looked on the screen when Apple gave it all the best possible lighting and did everything they could to make, to jazz it up as they do in a keynote. But you know something? In the real world, it's even nicer. The tolerances of each of those teeny tiny little links is astonishing. It really does feel like a ribbon of metal that flows, as opposed to what it really is, which is an extremely elaborate three-dimensional chain. The keynote only showed the black variant, but it is available in the natural titanium, and I think the natural titanium looks absolutely gorgeous, and of course it matches perfectly with the Apple Watch Ultra in natural titanium, and for the first time in a very long time, my phone actually matches, because I didn't buy a new phone, so last year's natural titanium iPhone also matches perfectly with the Apple Watch Ultra and the band. So the really cool thing is that by adding this very nice Milanese loop to the Apple Watch Ultra, which is on its own, and particularly with the other straps that tend to come with it, it looks utilitarian, it looks outdoorsy, it looks adventure-y, which 99.9% of the time is exactly the look I kind of like. I am quite an active person, I am quite a sporty person, so a watch that looks sporty and active doesn't feel wrong on my arm. In fact, I kind of like that look. And a lot of the watch straps I buy really play into that. They're big, chunky, playful, and or practical looking straps. But as soon as I slid this Milanese loop on, the watch transformed. It's the same watch, but it now transformed into an elegant timepiece that would look perfectly fine paired with the finest tuxedo. To be honest, it looks like the kind of watch James Bond would wear to impress. It is just amazing how it transforms this utilitarian, outdoorsy device into an elegant timepiece. It really is very pleasing how it does that, and that was what I was hoping it would do, and it does. Getting practical then. So I've already mentioned the magnetic closure really wasn't great. Well, that's been redesigned. But actually, I've just realized I need to get even more practical and say that unfortunately, this, like everything else that Apple make for the Apple Watch Ultra, it is only available in one size of lug. It is only available in the size of lug that is on the Apple Watch Ultra, which is the size of lug on the bigger of the two of every generation of Apple Watch. So if you have been buying non-Ultra watches of the smaller size, I am afraid there is no new Milanese loop available for you. But if you have any bigger watch of the two sizes from any era, it will work just fine. I checked this by sticking it on my blue Series 7. And it worked. It looked a bit odd having the natural titanium, but actually I think it works better on an opinionated watch like a blue or a red one than it would on the silver colored one, because the silver is just not quite the right color for titanium. And so I think that would actually look worse to have sort of the brushed aluminium next to the titanium would probably look pretty bad, whereas the titanium on blue or the titanium on red actually works grand. It actually looks quite nice. Okay, so the second practical point is, so that closure was absolutely terrible on the original Milanese loop. Have Apple done better on this one? Well, they've completely redesigned it. It is this, how the strap works is 100% different to the original Milanese loop. It's not a loop with a magnet and the magnet sticking to itself. It is a loop. So you do end up making it longer, sliding your arm through it and then tightening it onto your wrist. It is infinitely adjustable, but you can lock the adjustment. So you infinitely adjust it once, and then you use a quick release to open it, slide it on or off your arm, and then you can quickly, pull the loop tight and clip in the attachment. So Apple have called this attachment the parachute clasp. And what you need to imagine is it's a two-part piece of metal. One part receives the end of the loop, and the other part is around the watch strap. And there's a little switch that you can flick up. And when you flick it up, the metal attachment is free to move along the Apple Watch strap. So you put it where you need it to be, and then you push it down to lock it in place. And then the end of the loop just clips in. And so basically you unclip it and the watch is as big as possible. Then you put it over your arm, you pull it tight, and then you dock into the little docking thing and you are locked. And the parachute clasp has two little parallel buttons on each side, and you don't only push them. You push and pull back, which is actually the natural gesture to do because you basically push and pull apart. And only if you push and pull will it come loose. So if you are exercising or doing anything, you're not going to do this by accident. This mechanism is not going to trigger by accident. And yet, because it's pushed together and pulled back, it's completely natural when you really genuinely want to take the watch off. So I have found that to be an extremely clever design. I have zero doubt I have zero worry that this is going to come off when it shouldn't. And I have zero faffing about when I genuinely want it to come off. So I am really happy to have infinite adjustability, which I've always liked with the Velcro bands, but infinite adjustability with a memory. So I basically set it once, I don't have to worry about it. It is extremely nice. So the bottom line is, I don't ever remember spending, I have never spent this much money on an Apple Watch band. But I'm really happy I did. I do not regret this investment at all. I have now turned, my watch into an elegantly engineered piece of jewelry. It is absolutely gorgeous. I could wear it to a gala dinner. I can wear it to a meeting. And because it is titanium, it doesn't mind getting wet. So I have also worn it while out exercising and stuff, and it works just as well out there. So the same strap is as at home when I'm out getting a walk, when I'm on the bike, when I'm doing a housework, when I'm just in work, or in the world's fanciest gala dinner. It's at home everywhere. It's kind of amazing that one strap can do all of that. So like I say, I actually consider it to be value for money given the high quality. It's not cheap, but it is good value in my opinion for what you get for your money.
This week's list of heroes is long because of the new donation methods. In 1 week, donations came in from David and Lynn and Paul a second time, and Hans and Tom and John and Dave and Frank and Ian through Stripe, and then Klaus through Buy Me a Coffee. Oh, and Kevin wanted to play too, but he didn't understand the new assignment and he used PayPal. Bless his heart. Well, how awesome are all of these people? If you'd like to be nifty like them, you know where to go, podfeet.com/donate, to use Apple Pay or any credit card of your choosing. You've all heard me mention before our good friend, Pat Dengler, who's a certified Apple consultant. I'm always telling stories about things she helped me with. Well, I've asked her to come on the show to tell us a story of something that happened to her friend and neighbor, Dorothy. Welcome back to the show, Pat.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. So I talked to you shortly after this incident, I think within an hour or maybe it was right after, immediately after, but this is a pretty scary story you had to tell. So you're hanging out at your house, you were doing something, and you got a phone call.
No, actually, I share my driveway is between Dorothy's house and my house, and so I was outside. She popped her head in the window and she said, "I need your help." And she I think she might have specified, I need your help sending and texting an image.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay. So I walked around and met her at the front door.
I think you said, can I go change my clothes first or something like that? And she was like, no, now.
Yeah. Can I put my shoes on? Because I think I just had like slippers on and I'd come outside to check on the cat really quickly. So
okay.
It wasn't meant to be a longer thing. And she said, sure, but just come now.
Okay.
I was like, okay.
All right.
So I met her at the front door, and in a quiet voice, she said, I'm not supposed to tell anybody. You're not supposed to be here, but I need you to help me send a picture of my driver's license to the IRS. And right away I said, Dorothy, it's not real. It's bogus. And she assured me, she was very dead serious. She said, no, it's 100%, it's the IRS. So I thought, all right, I'm going to give her the benefit of, she's clearly been dealing with somebody on the phone. Maybe she called them. I don't know. So I walk in and she's got her iPhone, which I think is an 10R, maybe something like that. It's an older iPhone, but she's got it connected to the bathroom outlet because she's trying to charge it at the same time. She doesn't use her phone very much, her iPhone. And she, part of my curiosity with this was also because I know that she knows how to text pictures because I've showed her before and she's done it successfully. But she had an existing text message with someone, and she couldn't connect texting the picture from her camera, the camera app, into that message. She could initiate a new message, but then she didn't have that person's phone and blah, blah, blah. So that's where she kind of got stuck. And I was looking at it and I saw the phone number. And while she was playing with it, before she kind of let me in to do it, I tried to look up the number and it came as some very vague Maryland number.
Okay.
And I could hear somebody in the background on the speakerphone starting to get insistent. Like, can't you send me the message, blah, blah. And I thought, he's got the wrong attitude. If he's really from the IRS and if he's really trying to help her, he's being pushy. He had a small accent, not very much. So he spoke English very well, but he did have a slight accent. And I told Dorothy, I said, just hang up. And she did. She hung up the phone. And I said, this does not, when the phone was disconnected, right. I told her, I said, this does not sound right. And this, by the way, was about 3 p.m. And that's important because she started to tell me the story that it started at around 8 a.m.
Oh, wow.
She gets a phone call and it's from Amazon telling, now I'm going to do air quotes on these, which I know nobody can see. But whenever I say a name brand or an agency brand, they're air quotes.
All right.
So Amazon's calling her to tell her that the $1,000 charge for the laptop that she ordered to be shipped somewhere back east did not go through.
Now, hang on. It wasn't just $1,000. It was $1,279. So a very specific amount. So it was a laptop being charged to her account. The laptop that she had ordered to be shipped to New York. But it hadn't gone through
somewhere. Yeah.
And
correct.
And who was it? Do we know the name of the rep from Amazon?
In this case, yes. Yeah. So I'm telling you the story, but I went back later with her in the evening to get all of the details.
Okay.
So yeah, her rep, Emily Johnson.
Okay.
Called her and said, that the charge didn't go through. And of course, Dorothy says, I didn't order a laptop. This is not correct. And so Emily very helpfully says, well, who is your credit card through? Which bank? Dorothy answered Wells Fargo. And she said, okay, I'm going to transfer you to Wells Fargo because this is clearly fraud and you need to, check your bank. So she transfers her to Elena Brown at Wells Fargo.
Air quotes.
Remember, air quotes, yeah. And then Elena determined that, yes, this was indeed fraud and I need to transfer you to the feds because they did apparently use her social security number. I'm not sure how this came into the conversation, how this
Okay.
came up, but there you
Right.
go.
I don't remember putting my social security number into Amazon when I purchase things, but okay.
Yeah.
All right. This is what they told her. All right.
So she transferred her to Neil at the Federal Trade Commission, and he gave her his ID number, FTC number 10253, and we have the phone number. And Neil was going to run a whole check because he noticed, and by the way, he repeated her full social security number to her. She did not initiate giving that to anyone.
Wow.
So this is, I think, part of the reason why she was convinced that this was legitimate is because, okay, maybe they could have the last 4 digits of her social, but they shouldn't have her full social.
Yeah.
So he asked her in part of the conversation, where do you bank? And she listed off the various banks. She's a teacher's credit union, and I think she's also at Chase and at Wells Fargo. And he said he did a search and found that someone was taking out $67,000 a week against her social security number. This was the words that she used to tell me the story.
Okay.
And
from those bank accounts.
Yeah, from some bank account somewhere. And what they need to do is run an investigation, and they need to prove that Dorothy is not responsible for this. And in order to do that, and there's some sort of section number that he quoted, 19A, regarding money laundering. And so that she needs to freeze or suspend her banks and prove that she's not responsible and that she needs to get a new social security number. And what is going to happen is a Federal Trade Commission officer is going to come to her house, and we'll have some forms for her to fill out, some questions. And then ultimately what they're going to do is they're going to go in front of a judge and prove that this isn't her. And part of this process is they need her to go to all of her banks and withdraw $25,000
in cash
from all of her banks in cash.
I want to stop you for a second. This is incredibly elaborate. We have somebody pretending to be Amazon, somebody pretending to be Wells Fargo, somebody pretending to be the FTC, somebody pretending to be the FTC. This is
Treasury
incredible.
Department. Yeah.
Oh, wait. So we're going to go to the Treasury Department next.
Yeah, and then there's the IRS is going to get involved, an attorney at the IRS specifically.
This is elaborate.
She apparently then left the house, went to Chase, and withdrew $25,000 at Chase. They did have the manager come over and talk to her and say, "Listen, we're not really sure that this is legitimate." Let me just preface. When they told her to go to the bank and take out the cash, they said, "Don't tell them what it's for. Just make up a story like it's for, you're doing a renovation or you're doing landscaping or something, and you need to pay in cash." So she did that. So she goes to the bank, and the manager came over and she said, "No, I need the cash. This is, it's legitimate. This is what I need." And the bank manager emphasized, "Just so you know, if this is fraud, you are not protected. You will not get this money back." And she told him, "I get it," and she got her $25,000. And then she went to one of her other banks. I want to say it might have been the credit union. And at the credit union, they actually said, the most we're going to let you take out is $5,000. So they did limit her there. And my understanding is after she went to those 2 banks, she came home and she called them back or they called her back. And they said, "Okay, what we need now is a photograph of your driver's license sitting next to the cash." So that was the picture that she was trying to text to this phone number. And this is where she got stuck. Now, when I first looked at, this whole situation, the picture that she was trying to text, I thought, boy, it's a really lousy picture of her driver's license because it was small in the picture, but it didn't register what anything else was.
You weren't
in
noticing
that
the cash in the photo?
It was really small. It was on the phone, right? But after we hung up, this is when she walked me over to her kitchen counter, which is where she had the cash laid out and her driver's license there. And I realized, oh, this is what she was trying to text them.
Oh my!
So I'm glad
gosh.
we stopped it at that point.
Well, thank goodness she didn't know how to send the text message.
That's and she does know how to send a photo over text. She's done it millions of times with her family because I've shown her how to do it.
Yeah,
but it was the
like replying to an existing one
because they weren't in her address book.
Yeah,
that phone number.
She wasn't initiating it from photos
that she had gotten
and share.
Right.
She was starting from messages, trying to reach back and get a photo, and didn't know how to do that. Don't teach her.
So that's I haven't taught her. So of course, by the way, the instant that I had her hang up on whoever was on the phone with her, the phone just kept ringing and ringing. They were calling back.
I think you've skipped a step here.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm looking at Pat's notes. So let's see. The Federal Trade Commission officer said they'll come to her house. You talked about that part, but then he called back. And now it's gone to the U.S. Treasury Department, and an attorney is going to take over, and the call was transferred.
So the coming to her house part was after she sends them the text with her ID, which obviously was going to have her address on there, and then they were going to send somebody.
But this, your note said it went to the U.S. Treasury Department, and an attorney was going to take over, and the call was transferred. And we have yet another person, Alvaro.
Yeah, and this was the person who was he's running the investigation now. And he's the one that's verifying about the assets in all of her accounts. And part of this is he was going to get the cash.
He's the one that directed her to send the cash. Okay.
Yes.
And his ID number is PN1156. I mean, every single person's making this sound so freaking legitimate.
Yeah. And the great thing is she took notes. I mean, when she does this, when she's on the phone with whoever she's asking for help with, she takes really good detailed notes about who she's talking to and so on. Now, I will say that when I went back and I had her tell me the story from top to bottom, probably 3 different times in the story, she looked at me and shook her head and she said, I should have known this was bogus right here, at this point.
I hope you made her feel not stupid.
Oh, completely. I told her, I said, this is, and this is what I tell everybody, because I get a lot of calls from clients who says, I think I've been hacked. Probably not. Mm-hmm. More than likely, if anybody is getting access to your accounts, it's using something called, oh my God, it just escaped me. Social engineering.
Yeah, social engineering through phishing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a person who has convinced you to give them some of your information in some way, whether that's a password,
not a technology
to an email
hack.
Account. It's not what we see in the movies, where somebody's sitting in a van with a computer and I'm in now and I've turned off the security cameras. That's very rare.
Yeah.
So, I told her, I said, look, this is, it happens to everybody. And honestly, in my experience, it happens to my most educated clients, the ones who have the PhDs. It's the weirdest thing. I don't know if it's the level of, being able to sniff out bogusness is not as good or something. I don't know what that is, but that's just my little observation.
So
good news is
they were going to send a lawyer to her front door, and she was going to hand them the cash.
Right. That was the what was going to happen. Now, I am pretty sure I've seen a news report on this, and I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or Nightline or one of these news reporting things where they actually arrested the person who came to the door, who was more on the level of an Uber driver that was sent to pick up something, and they may not have known what it was.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is how this would have played out, or if some actor would have come, or somebody pretending to be somebody official would have come to pick up the cash from her. But so it ended well, thankfully, because as soon as I left her. She got in her car and went back to the bank and deposited the money. Now, a follow-up with Chase, with the bank, they, on their own, called the Los Angeles County of something in aging. And it's people who deal with elder abuse.
Oh.
And
Oh.
that person called her, came to the house once. She wasn't home. The second time he arrived, I happened to be there. I was just leaving. I was standing on her front porch with her, and he shows up and he has an ID, which I, of course, was extremely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm like, I bet you are. But he was really nice. Yeah, he offered to help her file a police report. And he wanted to be assured that that she didn't actually lose any money, and and that sort of thing. So he was that whole thing was initiated by the bank, which I'm really proud about Chase for that.
And I like that they tried really hard to help her not be trusting.
Yes,
I almost said stupid,
exactly,
and that's not the right word. Trusting.
No,
right?
Yeah, it's really that sort of, that false sense of trust in there that somebody convinced in her. And she retired from her work life as an assistant principal. So she's not a dumb person. She's traveled the world. Mm-hmm. She's taken many over. I've known Dorothy since I was 7 when we moved in the house next door. And over those years, she's traveled a lot. She's not dumb by any stretch of the imagination. But it's an emotional thing when somebody is convincing you that you may be at risk of having to go to jail, if we don't prove that you didn't do all this. So it's definitely unfortunate that this keeps happening, because clearly they must have a certain amount of success if they have enough people to get involved and do this kind of a.
To have 5 separate representatives faking 5 separate organizations. I think the reason I was really interested in having you on about this is because it's almost like we have to just keep reminding ourselves that this is out there and this can happen.
Yeah. And I've told this story many times since it happened. Pretty much every client that week had me sit down and tell them the story. And of course, their first reaction is, well, that would never happen to me. But you can't think that because it couldn't. It may be in a slightly less obvious form. Mm-hmm. We all get emails. This is an invoice of $400 to PayPal that you need to pay for this service that you bought. I mean, I'm getting those probably once a week.
Yeah.
And
I got caught out.
I also get them from clients.
I got caught out twice on the same one. It was a plugin that I used to use for WordPress, and I didn't even use it anymore, but I was like, I use so many different things that I've got. And I was like, let me click through this link. And luckily it didn't work, but I fell for it twice, 2 years in a row. I was like, geez,
I have clients that send me these emails, and I always tell them, please do. I mean, I'm not going to charge you for this. Just send them to me and ask me if I think that they're legitimate or not. And I've got another client whose email service, her company's email service, is through a vendor. And the email came from that vendor saying, click here, you need to update all your passwords because, if you don't, your email is going to stop working in the next month. Mm-hmm. And it was not legitimate. If you look at who it's actually from.
If you hover over it and see the.
Yeah. But the email looked authentic. It had their logo and, the wording seemed correct. It had a button on there to click.
Yeah, and with AI, all those emails look a lot better than they used to. You used to be able to spot them a mile away because they were misspelled and they had all these goofy characters in them and everything.
Emojis
in
the subject line,
They're getting better and better. I think the 2 things that I like to keep in mind on this is, one is all of these breaches we hear about, you don't immediately get hacked, but the amount of information that exists about you, the fact that they had her social security number, well, of course they did. That's been hacked from somewhere. I mean, mine happened to be the federal government who gave it away accidentally. But there's a treasure trove of information. I mean, I'm sure they know my kid's name, where my kids live, my grandkids' names, my
Your
dog's
maiden name.
My maiden name. Yeah. Well, again, the government gave that one away. But the wealth of information that's available that they could make you think they know they're coming from a place of authority because they have this information is vast. And the only thing you can do is never trust anything. Initiate everything on your own. Like, had she thought to say, wait a minute, $67,000 a week is being pulled out of my accounts. I should be able to log into my accounts actively on my own and see what my balance is. And if it's negative now, at $67,000 a week, I don't know if Dorothy's, heir to the Hearst Foundation money wouldn't notice that, but.
I think in that case, it was that they had used her social security number to open up a line of credit at a different bank or something that she didn't have control over.
Ah, okay. Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good story to keep telling. And I think, we had Ed on to talk about his sister-in-law and how she's been scammed and is continuing to be scammed to this day because she is convinced that gentleman that writes to her is her boyfriend. Telling these stories over and over again helps us keep it front of mind, so that whenever we're talking to somebody. I'm so happy with Steve's parents. The minute anything looks even the teeniest, tiniest bit weird on screen, they pick up the phone and they always say, oh, sorry to bother you. No, keep bothering me. And their spidey sense is really good now. They spot all kinds of weird stuff. So telling these stories is important. And I appreciate you coming on to tell us about it.
Oh, sure. Anytime.
All right. Well, if you're in the Los Angeles area, you should contact me if you need someone who is intelligent, resourceful, educated on everything about Apple stuff and networking, and will not make you feel stupid, which, by the way, I always tell people that's your superpower, especially with female clients. I don't want to diss all men or anything, but there are times when men will maybe be a little dismissive, perhaps, in talking to some women. Pat is the person you want to call, whether you're male or female. If you're in the LA area, you should definitely contact me to get a hold of her, unless you want to give out contact information directly, Pat.
Sure. You can reach me by email at pat@Dengler Consulting, and that's DEN as in Denmark, GLER consulting.com. Anything else, if you really need my phone number, you can get that from Allison.
And just send me $1,279 and I'll send that to you.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for coming
credit card. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show, Pat.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeet.com anytime you like? I bet you knew that. But you can always send a question or a suggestion right to that email. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. You can follow me on Mastodon, podfeet.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube with nothing interesting going on, you can go to podfeet.com/YouTube. If you want to join the conversation, you can join our Slack community at podfeet.com/Slack, where you can talk to me and all of the other lovely No-Silla castaways. You can support the show at podfeet.com/Patreon or with a one-time donation at podfeet.com/PayPal or podfeet.com/donate. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic No-Silla castaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.